Season 5 of Binge O'Clock Podcast will be discussing The Terror, an AMC show based on the book of the same name. Although The Terror is a fictionalization of real events, the material depicts medical, survival, and supernatural horror, as well as racism, misogyny, gore, and violence. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Binge O'Clock, the podcast where we watch something and then we talk about it. I'm Joy Selden. I've seen almost everything.
I'm Danielle Nga, and I've seen almost nothing.
I'm Nella, and if you're not sitting, sit down, because I have got some hot goss from the 1840s, y'all.
Nella has been teasing me with this hot goss like all night, and I was like, don't tell me, don't talk about it. We have to save it for the podcast.
We have to record our genuine reactions.
Save it for the pod.
If something is said and the reaction isn't recorded, did it really happen?
But yes, friends, if you're not joining us for the first time, goodness gracious. If you are, oh boy, you might want to rewind a few episodes.
Like at least just like 4 episodes. You don't have to go back to the beginning, but go back 4 episodes.
We have watched The Terror, Season 1, Episode 4 for this podcast. Mm-hmm. And it was a doozy. It was not quite as gory as the last episode.
I don't know.
I suppose that depends on the definition of gore.
Yeah, I was going to say, I feel like in terms of the horror elements, this episode leans more into sort of those slow burns, which we can get into, and fewer of the, it's coming to the roof, jump scare, you know?
True. Are we still doing a last time on, or do you want to hold that for the end?
If you want the last time on, go and listen to the last episode, everybody. We can't do everything for you all the time.
Or like the first little bit of it and get that synopsis, you know? Okay, so speaking of synopses, this synopsis for episode 4 was pulled directly from Wikipedia. So another thing you can do if you forget what happened in the episode is look it up. Episode 4 is titled Punished as a Boy. By November 1847, as the creature continues killing members of the British expedition, the crews of Erebus and Terror begin to consider it supernatural. Opportunistic Cocker's mate Cornelius Hickey leads an unauthorized expedition to abduct Lady Silence, bringing her back to the ships in the belief that she is controlling the creature. When Hickey disputes his punishment during a debriefing, Crozier orders him subject to a more severe lashing than his fellow abductors, ordering him to be, quote, punished as a boy. An increasingly alcoholic Crozier announces to Terror's crew an opportunity to transfer to Erebus due to Terror's precarious location on a fault in the ice, and all but 10 of Terror's crew depart for Erebus.
But we open on Sophie and Lady Jane in November of 1847.
Oh,
yes.
I love these two. I love this scene that we get with them. I love that we get to know them. I love that we get to meet Sophia when she's not just rejecting Crozier.
Yes, right? And what a good setup this is, because we know that Franklin has been dead at this point. Sir John has been dead since June 11th. So now we are in November. He has been dead for months. And we see what a good dichotomy between Lady Jane's well, we're just going to get it done. We're just going to talk to them. And if they won't do it, we'll do it ourselves. Mm-hmm. And the encroaching dread on Sophia, knowing that something terrible is wrong, as she looks around the Admiralty, the sitting area of the Admiralty, and notes like, where's the Battle of Chesapeake? Where's the Battle of blah, blah, blah? Mm-hmm. You know, and she's naming all the disasters, all the defeats, whereas all the paintings, of course, are the successes. And very pointedly, she notices the portrait of Sir John, her uncle, and Fitzjames, but there's no portrait for Crozier here.
Mm-hmm. And she can hear them laughing and carrying on in the other room as she waits, which I know what it's like to stand outside of a room right before a meeting, a serious meeting also, like something really serious, and to hear people like joking and carrying on and like not preparing, or at least in your mind preparing, and as we see, like definitely not going to take this next meeting seriously. I felt that. It was a very visceral feeling when she was like, and they're laughing. They're so loud.
It is. It's you can feel the kind of helpless feeling of, are they even going to listen to us? Are they even going to respect our concerns? Are they just going to treat us like two hysterical women?
Yeah, and I mean, the answer to those questions is yes, they're being treated like hysterical women, and no, they're not being respected, right? Like, they bring up valid point after valid point. You've only gotten 2 replies. No one has seen the ships. Like, Lady Jane tells that story about how she stood in the snow for X amount of time just to see how long she could withstand it, right? And I will say that slowly they start to break the Admiralty down a little bit.
Well, I think I'd like to emphasize 3 of the big players at this table right now. Mm-hmm. Sitting at the head of the table is Sir John Barrow himself.
Yes.
So you have that, second secretary of the Admiralty. And to his left, sitting next to each other, are the 2 Rosses. You have John Ross, the older Scotsman, and then you have his nephew, James Clark Ross, who was besties with Francis. And throughout the discussion, there are times where the 2 Rosses look uncomfortable. They look at each other knowingly. Mm-hmm. They are the only 2 people at this table who have extensive Arctic polar experience. Right. They know more so than Barrow, who is absolutely dismissive of Lady Jane's concerns,
right,
of the dangers that the expedition was heading into.
Right.
Yeah, fair. I mean, the only moment he agrees with her is when she says, well, we all know Francis or Crozier wasn't your first choice. And
you all know that my husband, bless him, was not your first, not your second. He was barely your third choice for this. So wouldn't it be better? And what a beautiful way they depict Lady Jane using the Victorian gendered sensibilities against the Admiralty.
My favorite thing, too, is when they're like, you don't know anything about geography, and she just kind of blinks at them. Like, excuse you.
Which is wild. By this point, Lady Jane had already taken on quite a reputation as being an explorer herself. She was the first white woman, or the first noble, rich, well-to-do, not sent there on a penal colony ship, white woman to explore New Zealand and Australia.
I love how many asterisks.
I needed I needed to put down every single last caveat on that.
All the
and we appreciate every single caveat.
The first white woman to go to those places for interest and pleasure, and not because she was sentenced to die there.
These are valid points. But and I love that they slowly, not take them seriously, but at least they slowly respect them, and, or at least in so much as, like you were saying, like the Victorian way about them is going to allow.
We see the beginning here of Lady Jane Franklin's campaign to find her husband. And there's nothing the Victorian age loved more than a martyr. And Lady Jane made herself, and Sophia, they both made themselves the perfect feminine martyrs to the cause. And we see the beginning of that campaign here. But immediately, as soon as they're out of the meeting, and boy, does Lady Jane throw some real truths down on the table. Like some of the quotes, like when she's talking again, as you say, about going out into the snow and sitting there in her bare feet until she couldn't stand it anymore, saying, no one can convince me that optimism or confidence is warm enough. Mm-hmm. And then her looking around the table and saying, most of you gentlemen have written your memoirs. I've read them. The past tense is a very sturdy thing. It's earned, but it does take for granted that one has survived. Present is a different case entirely.
I love it so much.
That was my favorite.
Mike
and that's where she gets them. Like, listen, yes, they come around and they give her some measure of respect, but at the end of the day, they say, listen, it's not that we're not taking you seriously, but this is a polar expedition. We're going to search for the men in 1850. It's November of 1847. They're going to give them 2 more years, 2 years and 2 months before they get out there.
Just wild. And of course, James Clark Ross, bless his heart, leans forward like, I will personally lead that expedition. And it was just like, in 1850, Jimmy? In 1850.
1850. Far too little, far too late.
No, but of course that's it. That, she tried. So Lady Jane's going to do the next best thing, which is she's going to fund her own ship.
Throw money at it until their money is gone.
She will shame her friends with money until they start writing checks.
Yes. She will do the Victorian crowdsource.
Truly, truly.
I just...
And Sophia's just like following behind her, puppy dog style. I mean, they don't let her do much in the scene, which I'm okay with. I am excited to see where they take her, what direction they take her story in, and whether she gets to take a more active role in this. But for right now, that's sort of where she's at.
Although, can I just say, as they're walking out of the room and they're in the staircase, how much I love the decision for you to be able to see the breath on the as they talk. As Lady Jane says, I feel he is here with us now, talking about her husband. Mm-hmm. And they are in a freezing corridor.
Yeah, they're not even outside.
What a good choice.
They're
they are inside, and
they're on the stairs.
Bone-chillingly cold.
And I was just...
what a good choice.
And also you have that beautiful, supernatural ghost story of like, well, of course, when it's cold and you can see people's breath, that's when a ghost hangs around,
Well, see, that's how I interpreted it. I interpreted it as the room is cold, like his ghost is there.
Yeah. But I meanwhile, I'm also sitting there just like, well, if it's this cold in London, where are we? Is it?
No, they're in London.
Yeah. Like, if it's this cold in London and just like, this is...
In November.
Like, this is your connection. And I'm just like, look, I know global temperatures and freezing points and things like that are different for different places on the planet. But I'm just like, if it's this cold in London, like, what even was the winter around... Well, I mean, not around the Arctic, but you know what I mean? Like, what even was that winter like for other countries? I wonder.
Yeah.
I mean, I've discussed this before. We know that the Donner Party happened the same year that the Franklin expedition
Oh, that's right.
did.
I forgot.
So we know, they got snowed in. Bad news for them.
Oh, boy.
What a year for cannibalism that was.
What a gangbuster year for cannibalism. Banner year, everybody. Good job. Good job. Okay, we did it.
Now, there's a pretty fantastic smash cut here because we go from that scene with Sophia, Lady Jane, and the Admiralty and smash cut to a birthday celebration.
Yes.
On the ship. It's someone's birthday. Everyone is gathered around him singing for he's a jolly good fellow and giving him a pretty terrible birthday haircut. And then dogpiling him afterwards.
Yes.
Nella, is this a thing? What is this?
I mean, look, the Navy has a fine tradition of hazing. One day ask me about what the ceremony is for crossing the equator. It's buck wild. It is wild. They used to pull when you had someone crossing the equator for the first time. It involved someone dressing up like Neptune, by the way.
Okay, we're going to have to save that for another time, but I desperately want to hear
Please,
that.
somebody put a pin in that.
I 100% believe that it entirely makes sense that he's one of the younger people on the ship, too. He was a ship's boy. Yeah, you're gonna tease the younger guy. You're gonna give him an awful haircut because you're a man now or some nonsense, or you're the youngest of us and we're all your older brothers and we're gonna give you a hard time. I 100% believe it. But I love how the scene, everyone's having a good time. They're making the best of this awful situation. They're trying to keep in high spirits. While meanwhile, we're on much shorter watches. You might have missed it, but they discuss the dog watches. And that means instead of 4 hours on deck, they're up there for 2 hours. And then they're swapping people out. Because you have to imagine, we're getting into the real winter of the Arctic. We're going to get our last day of sun. And the temperatures are going to drop even. No one can be out there longer than 2 hours is pretty
Brutal
much
scene.
what we're getting into. Brutal weather is coming, if not already here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The other thing I like about this scene and a few subsequent scenes as sort of a through line of this episode is that you start with the crew here in high spirits gathered together for a birthday party.
Yeah,
right?
and there's some light. They're by the stove. There's a feeling of warmth, of camaraderie.
Yes.
And I swear to God, we smash cut to Francis drinking alone in the dark.
Oh, yeah. And that's exactly what this episode does. Like, the chef is in the foreground. He's making food for everyone. And as the episode, like, bops back and forth between Francis and the men, Francis is descending further and further into alcoholism, which he was already an alcoholic, but he continues to descend. And the crew creeps closer and closer and closer to not mutiny directly.
Dissatisfaction.
Yes.
There's absolutely a sense that Crozier has checked the fuck out. Jobson, his steward, comes in and tries to give him the rundown for the minutes. There's an officers meeting that's going to be happening soon. He tries to approach him with some concerns people have had, like Irving. Irving's a little worried about the food supply. Cans are coming up as putrid.
I've so been that person in the office where it's like, hey, listen, I've got one job and I'm telling you that this is serious and it's important and you got to pay attention. And everyone else is like so focused on their own areas of expertise. They're not even thinking about what you're saying.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I feel like we've all been there. Although I don't know if that's also like all being women on this call. I'm just like, hard feel.
Look, have I had to manage the bad moods of a boss? Yes.
Correct.
Yes, I have. Do I identify with Jobson in this moment? Yes.
Oh man.
Yes, I do.
I am Team Jobson for like this entire show.
No, Jobson is too good to
Jobson
cure.
is the saint that we did not deserve.
Yeah.
We haven't even gotten to the real good Jobson stuff yet, and I'm already Jobson is perfect.
I know.
Okay, wait. So he also mentions that the Terror's bow has lifted 9 inches. So is this
that's
the
when
thing
they start
where the plates under the ship are like pushing and it's pushing the ship up? That's what's happening?
Terror has a fault has opened, and now 2 ice plates are pushing the Terror up. And so that's where we start getting a really bad slant in you see it very clearly, especially in the scenes with Crozier as he sits in the great room in the dark.
By the way, he's been drinking all night. It's almost 4 in the morning.
Yes, it's true. I got to tell you, Danielle, that incline becomes a metaphor for Crozier real fast. Like, we haven't seen it yet, but this is the beginnings of the, hey, guess what? Your boat is listing real bad. Yeah. You're going to have to do something about that.
Buckle up, buddy.
You can't just ignore this problem.
You cannot just ignore the problem.
Drink until springtime comes, you know? Okay, so all of that is happening. There are all of these issues, and all of a sudden we hear gunshots. Francis is half drunk, but he runs to the main deck, and I don't
100% one of those drunks who's a functioning alcoholic who's just like, I throw my coat on and I run outside.
I
and
mean,
I
like
take care
functioning,
of it.
but like quotes on functioning, right?
Yeah,
because
right.
As the episode continues, he makes this terrible decision after terrible decision, beginning with his orders to the men, right? So they get up to the deck, and it turns out that the bear has actually like ripped one of the men off of the deck. Well, actually, it's done 2 things. It fully ripped the top of a guy's head off so that his brain is showing, and then it took another guy completely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, friends. I did forget about that gory moment. Apologies.
I was like, Joy, this episode was pretty gory. Okay,
to be fair, I watched this episode like a week ago.
No, very true. I watched it no less than 30 minutes ago. So, guy with the brain exposed is like lying on the deck, and Francis is like, well, bring him downstairs. His brain is going to freeze over, right? Then they find out that someone's missing. So Francis is like, well, we got to go get him. And he sends like 30 odd men out in pairs to go and just like search in a circle around the ship, like outwards from the ship, to see whether they can hunt this man down. And one of the ship's boys desperately
Well, the
wants
birthday
to join
boy,
the search.
Young.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
I didn't realize those were the
it's the
same
birthday boy.
person. I
Yeah.
heard like Evans and then I heard Young and did not
Yeah.
connect that they were in fact
Well,
the same
because,
person.
he's covered his head, so. Because it's
really-
cold outside.
It's cold outside. But he didn't lift up his muffler. He needed a reminder to lift up his muffler.
Yeah.
This poor ship's boy. And off he goes with Francis to go aid in the search.
And Francis lets him because he figures he'll be with me. He'll be as safe as anyone else could be, possibly.
Is this the alcohol? Like, what's happening here?
That's the problem when you're a functioning alcoholic. That's all in your head. You're not actually.
Well, I think
functioning.
also like Crozier hasn't seen the supernatural bear, right? Like Crozier has just heard stories from Good Sir, who seems to have a good head on his shoulders. But like, I think ultimately, like, even though Franklin was the loudest dissenting voice when they heard the reports of like, it didn't really seem like a bear, sir. Like it's something else. It's a monster, and I can't fully explain why, but it's, it scares the crap out of me, and like I think he genuinely still thinks that this is a polar bear. And yes, I'm not discounting but Francis, you're still drunk. 100%. Like, friendo. No, don't send someone else. Send Fitzjames. Send literally anyone.
This is where Francis, where he thinks it's just a bear, this is where he learns the hard way. Because out on the ice, the Tumbok, it sets traps. It taunts them.
Certainly does.
It separates parties. It's smart. It is a thinking being. And this is where Francis realizes it, because as he separates from Young.
Yeah, to go up a ridge, like it's barely a separation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, he's just kind of not an eye shot. Like, that's the thing I was so... because, spoilers, friends, Young does not survive this little expedition. He is no longer with the captain, and he's taken.
Oh, yeah,
he
was taken. Like, there's literally...
there is blood on the ice, but we don't find the body.
That's exactly
yet.
it. It's like a big smudge of blood on the ice.
Right.
And all they found of the other person who was taken off the ship is the trap that's set, which is a coat just kind of sprawled on the ground so that it looks like a human body. So when Crozier runs over it and lifts up the coat, he realizes like, oh shoot, not a body. And then Evans is gone, right?
Yeah.
So again, impulse control, not really something that he has right now. I have to believe that the Crozier, who wasn't up until 4 a.m, would have taken a beat and made sure that Evans was with him. But this Crozier did not do that. He just ran straight for the body. And as a result, Evans is dead.
And it's bad. It's bad. And Crozier knows it's bad. Mm-hmm. He's at least with it enough to know that. But he does not stop drinking.
No, if anything, it just drives him to drink more.
You know what I just realized?
What?
This is the problem of the terror, where it's not Young. His name is Strong, actually. Young, David Young was the guy who died in the first episode.
Oh.
So it's the two men who die are Evans. Evans is the one who begs to go with Crozier and who is lost on the ice. And Strong is the one who had the birthday and was pulled off the ship.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
All right. I gotcha. So birthday
in
boy
addition,
is
that
dead.
happened at the same time as the head, as the brain.
Yeah, who's
as
brain
the
guy?
exposed skull.
Yeah. Brain guy is, I mean, I remember what his name is in the book. I'd have to, I'm realizing, wait, but in the book, his name was...
I know, the names, sorry, friends, the names get a little away from us.
I mean, listen, you have many recordings of me constantly confusing these characters because they're all, I have no sense of their names. He's just brain guy. It's birthday boy, brain guy, and ship's boy.
I mean, he is a Marine. He is a Marine, and that becomes important. All these notes, and somehow I forgot to write his goddamn name down.
No, that's all right. Don't worry about it.
Guy.
But here's, actually, this is a great segue, Nella, because I wanted to ask you because I feel like around here is where we start paying attention to the the Tumbok and how he chooses his victims, so to speak. I feel like we're getting close to what that could be, but I don't necessarily know. Obviously it's still that, the sense that we've talked about before of like, you shouldn't be here. This is not a place for you to be.
I mean,
but there's also like,
maybe I need to like put my critical thinking cap on because I have not pieced a pattern together yet, other than just like out and available.
Yes. I would say it's who's available, but whoever is available, boy, does, at least in the book, the Tumbok is very, very pointed about how it taunts and hunts whoever it is that it has its sights on. With Strong and Evans, it's very calculated, and we'll see that later on when something else happens we haven't gotten to in the episode. I wouldn't say there is like a rhyme or reason to it aside from who's available, who the Tumbok grabs first, and it just so happens that Strong, and his name is Heather, actually, the Marine whose brain gets ripped apart.
All right. Soon to be.
His name is
R.I.P.
Heather. Yeah. Well, not really R.I.P. because he lives.
Well, that's why I said soon to be. Soon to be R.I.P. I just assume you're not going to survive with like half your brain exposed.
Give it a couple of months. Actually. Spoilers.
He quote unquote survives for a long amount of time.
And
I mean, we can get into the debate of like vegetative state versus consciousness versus whatever, but like his heart continues to pump, and he seems to breathe for a much longer period of time than I think anybody expected.
This is actually, and I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit because this is a major point of the book as well. Heather is one of the Marines. The Marines were the lowest paid members of the expedition. And when this happens to Heather in the books, all the Marines gather together and they change him, they bathe him, they take care of him.
Wait, Nella, in the show, are those the guys in red? Or
yes, they are. Those are the Marines.
Yeah. Okay, because I remember they were like disgruntled and talking about him after the injury. Yeah. I got you.
Exactly. Okay. And that's where we're going to get into the problem of Crozier, who is one of the biggest ones grumbling about what has happened, what happened to Heather. But they will literally, in the book, they drag Heather's body onto land when they abandon the ships. Mm-hmm. And he survives almost until the bitter end because he is cared for.
Right. Like there's a sense of solidarity.
Yeah, like you take care of your own, right? Mm-hmm. And we see that in other times in other places. And here we have with Dr. Stanley, who's the worst, who they're over this man as they're giving him care with, half his skull off and his brains exposed. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Stanley looks at it and how he views it like it's a pudding. And McDonald, the other doctor, goes, well, I consider it a cathedral. And there we have the two genders, everybody. Either you see, people as only meat bags and there's nothing special about them, or you look at what makes us human and then you can still find the marvel in what keeps us alive and keeps us going and what holds what makes us who we are.
Yeah. And I love just the idea that, yes, of course, you would try and take care of people as much as possible because, well, number one, there's like literally nothing else to do. But number two, you could just make sure to keep that piece of hope alive that your friend would at least be either made comfortable or like extended their life because your life is also in peril, And like, I love stories like that where it's just like, yes, there's no way out, but somebody has twisted an ankle, so you're going to make sure that they lean on you to try and hobble around,
Yeah,
for sure.
And it's a sense of solidarity, and it gives you a sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm. I wish we could have seen more of the Marines caring for him. Unless we did. Am I missing that? I mean, I know they were disgruntled, but like...
Not so much in this episode, but if he in fact survives for as long as you're saying he is, there's not to say it couldn't come up again. I don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't seen this
I
show.
know we see him
But also
again.
the thing is, people are, they're wearing their weatheralls, people start growing hair and growing beards and they all look like big shaggy men all together and like it can get confusing. In the book, it is made very, very clear that the Marines in particular are very, very careful of the care of Heather because this is one of theirs.
No, I love
now,
that.
bringing that back to the idea that you started with, Nella, the problem of Crozier.
Wow, that feels like a lifetime ago. Okay, what is my problem with Crozier again?
Because Crozier is not prioritizing.
Because he's not one
he
of
was
them.
grumbling about the...
Like, he's not one of them is where I imagined you were going with that, but I'm not, in fact, sure.
Oh, well, I mean, it's definitely, you start to see those fissures between the officers and, the servicemen of Crozier went out into the ice and Evans got. We were on deck doing our job and our guy Heather is now missing his head.
Yeah, and
but
where
still
was
alive.
Crozier during all of this? Below decks drinking himself silly, right? And it just keeps on happening.
Yeah. Look me in the eye and tell me, had Franklin not still been alive, he wouldn't have, made time in his very empty schedule to, stand around with the men and offer them some good words and, to pat them on the back.
He did, and that's what led to his demise.
Yeah.
You know?
I know. I was just going to say.
He put himself in danger's way, and he got, right?
Yeah.
But Francis isn't doing that. And so thus far, Francis has been able to avoid danger, but everyone else is starting to see it, right?
Yeah.
And then,
I think this is a good time to start talking about Francis and James Fitzjames.
Oh, Francis and James Fitzjames. Okay, first of all, that scene that they have together, the first scene they have together,
yes,
is directly after Evans dies.
Yes.
When Francis is back to his cups, continuing the drink, and he's
trying to process what happened.
Yeah. And he acknowledges that he shouldn't have left Evans alone, right? And Fitzjames, looks at him, then looks at his glasses and says, maybe you should slow down on that a little bit. And Francis reacts by fully reaching for the bottle and pouring himself another glass, and then going on to say, dude, we don't have anywhere to go. We don't have anything to do. There's nothing we can do until spring comes and we can be rescued somehow.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If there's one thing I will say about the book, is that it has so many more scenes like this between Francis and James that are really enjoyable, even when Francis is being a total asshole to Fitzjames because he's not sober, right?
Yeah.
I think about this one scene that I think ties in really well to this episode, where in the book, Fitzjames says, "They think it is no animal," says Fitzjames. "They believe its cunning is something else, is preternatural, supernatural, that there is a demon out there on the ice in the dark." Crozier almost spits. He is so disgusted. "Demon," he says in contempt. "These are the very seamen who believe in ghosts, fairies, Jonahs, mermaids, curses, and sea monsters." "I've seen you scratch the sail to summon wind," Fitzjames says with a smile. Crozier says nothing. And you get much more of that relationship getting built in the book after Franklin dies, of them having to come together as the two captains. And Fitzjames being the one who has the sort of bead on what the men are talking about, what they're worried about. And Crozier doesn't. Crozier gets upset because the men have started calling the demon, the Toonbach, the Terror. And he's like, "That's the name of my ship. How dare you?" He gets so affronted.
I wish we could have had something like that in the show.
That would have been great. I love this scene between the two of them, though, because as Fitzjames is pushing back against Francis and his utter pessimism, because I refuse to call it realism, he's sinking
this is
into
pessimism.
He's I know that they're in dire straits, and he's sinking into the depths.
Well, yeah, he's deep in a Brown study.
Deep in it. And Francis finally says, "I don't get it. I don't understand why you're here. We all volunteered to come here. You don't believe in the cause. What's the deal?
Yeah.
And it's revealed. And see, I'm actually curious as to how much of this is like accurate or made up or like to move the narrative forward. But in the show, Francis says, I actually am here on orders. He says his orders are keep Sir John safe and ensure his judgment. And then reveals that these are not orders from the Admiralty. This is what Sophia has asked him to do. Fitzjames, puts two and two together. It all clicks.
Mind blown.
Like, wait a minute. Sophia, what's with the last name? I can't remember the last name.
Crawcroft. Oh, no. So I keep pronouncing it wrong.
I can't. I looked at it and was like, I don't have time.
Crawcroft. Sophia Crawcroft.
Okay, so he's like, so Miss Crawcroft? Her? Didn't she reject you twice? And it finally all clicks and he realizes that's why you're here. That's why you're here. Because
even worse so, when didn't she reject you twice? And then Francis realizes, were you talking about my attempts to marry Sophia with Sir John? And it's just like those two catty bitches were sitting on the Erebus talking about you the whole damn time.
I know.
Maybe you should have come to the officers' dinners. Maybe you would have been in on it. But no.
Oh, my giddy aunt. And I'm just like, when he realizes that, Fitzjames knows all the hot gossip about him. He knows, because I'm sure Sir John Franklin couldn't keep his mouth shut.
But let's be clear. Fitzjames, the cattiest of them all, is not going to realize that he shouldn't have said the things that he said. No. Yes, of course we were talking about you, Crozier. You just never were there to be
Captain James, tell us about Birdshit Island. That's a capital story, Fitzjames.
I know.
I Fitzjames tries to backpedal, and he's like, we weren't talking about it. Sir John just told me about it, It's like,
I wish the listeners could have seen my Muppet flail because... Bless. But here, we'll find out things about Fitzjames and how good he is at really tapping into what the men need later on in the show. Because he is, those are his strengths. His strengths are understanding, the people under him and being one of them and wanting to, push the envelope and wanting to get out there as far as he possibly can. He's very good at that. But, man, is he bad at understanding people like Crozier? Because ultimately, you don't tell you don't tell the odd kid at high school that you've been talking about them for the last year and a half,
something like
with
that.
The principal.
I mean, listen, we can only hear the story of. We can only hear the China story so many times. Eventually, you're going to share the story of rejection number 2.
Yeah, for real.
I mean, also, it's just this is a Franklin problem, not a Fitzjames problem, but we can get into that also. But I think they were both too catty for their own good, and Fitzjames forgot who he was talking to. But again, what else are you going to do on these boats? As someone who's been cooped up for 3 years because of a global pandemic, I'm also just what is societal rules anymore? I don't know.
We're going to get to it in a moment, but I too would be talking, about Crozier if it were me, because there's some goss there, and I have it. I have the tea. But we should probably move on to Hickey.
Death
let's move on to Hickey.
4.
We have to hit Hickey.
Actually.
Wait, what was that, Danielle? I'm sorry.
No, I said death number 2, and then I was like, wait, it's not 2, it's more like 4. Of this
3.5.
3.5. Okay.
Anyway, Hickey has his watch on the top deck. Mm-hmm. And boy, what good horror this is.
Yeah.
Because he's walking on the deck, you see what's behind him. He turns, and then suddenly there is a body there leaning against the rail. What a big
figure.
Nope, that is.
Well, yeah, you don't even know it's a body at first. You think maybe it's one of the, maybe one of the men that we lost, of just we can't find him. like hard
like
to say.
peeking over the edge of the deck just to see something down there, Hickey, like many of the people in this show, goes toward the danger rather than away from it.
This is how you know it's a boat full of white men.
And the body falls and it's cut in half.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is.
Like
and what
through
we
the
find,
stomach, like top half, bottom half.
Yeah, clean cut. What we find out is that one half is Strong and the other half is Evans.
Mm-hmm.
And the Toonbach has returned them, placed one on top of the other, and left it on the deck as the worst gift ever.
And left it within a time period that Hickey would have literally turned around, walked to the other side of the ship. The Toonbach would have had to do this relatively silently. And then he turns back around to pace in the other direction, and there it is.
Yeah. And then when he looks over the side, you see in the distance the Toonbach walking away.
He actually sees it. He actually sees the Toonbach walking away.
Yeah, this is...
which we haven't even really seen it yet.
Right. If I'm not mistaken, this is also the first time Hickey encounters the Toonbach at all, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
We will start to see this more later, but pay particular... This is kind of a behind-the-scenes thing, but pay particular attention to the way the Toonbach is portrayed and how he looks throughout this series. He looks very different from the first time we see him to what is essentially the last time we see him. But you sort of start to see these little changes, like in his coat, in his appearance. And they're very subtle, and I don't want to give too much away. But just start looking at that.
Okay, I like that. I actually appreciate that, because now I will keep a weather eye out.
Yeah.
Now... Okay, so a lot of things happen in pretty quick succession, which I'll try to summarize because I don't want us to get stuck in the weeds of explaining the episode. I would rather hear the hot goss, right? So the men conduct a very quick investigation, and the long and short of it is that no human cut these two men in half and then put them together. This absolutely was some sort of monstrous creature, and it cannot have been done by Lady Silence. However, they still decide to go and abduct her or find her or retrieve her, whichever verb you want to use, because they want to question her.
Well, right. Well, there's two different things happening here. One, you have the officers talking about it within the Great Room, right? And you have all the different sort of takes on it. You have people reporting back that there were no human footsteps around the ship. There were giant bear-like ones, however. Those were the only ones that was there. It's the creature.
Yeah.
But then you have James Fitzjames going full racist on this. And I do want to point out that what the show has done is they have put Charles Dickens' words in Fitzjames's mouth. By 1845, Dickens was retaliating against the account of Dr. Ray, who had interviewed Inuit, had explored the area himself, and Dickens was in the process of desperately trying to discredit the Inuit evidence, and he was attacking the Inuit character. And what he straight up wrote, "We believe every savage in his heart covetous, treacherous, and cruel, and we have yet to learn what knowledge the white man, lost, houseless, shipless, apparently forgotten by his race, plainly famine-stricken, weak, frozen, and dying, has of the gentleness of Eskimo nature." By 1865, he writes a whole play, which is an allegory of the Franklin expedition, and he really digs in deep about his dislike of Dr. Ray, about his dislike of the Inuit, you name it, he puts it in this play. And there's a reason this play has never been performed outside of his life.
Wait, so you're saying that when Fitzjames says from what we know of the, and then he inserts
and then he literally says that, we know they're covetous, treacherous, and cruel. That's Dickens. That is Dickens. And we have made Fitzjames the voice piece of Dickens in this scene.
Yeah. And I also, and not to discredit that, because 100%, these things about Dickens I didn't know for 200, Alex.
Oh, yeah. Oh, and the another big thing, he had 10 children with his wife and then cheated on her because she was like, we need to stop having sex because it's too many kids. So he's like, I'll cheat with another woman then.
I swear to
Dickens fun fact.
I know.
So-
By the end of this, you will all hate Dickens with the same fiery passion I do.
Well, so listeners, I don't know, we haven't necessarily gotten into it on the pod, but like the thing that turns me off for real life as well as fictional story, the biggest thing is an adulterous storyline. And I'm like, oh, all I needed to know was that Dickens was an adulterer, and now I'm done.
Yeah.
Canceled forever.
Canceled forever. No, but I wanted to also bring this up because the show, while, yes, this is an extremely important point, and obviously I think that's exactly what the show was doing, the show also lumps in, rightly so, I think, this connection that the men on the ship make to other indigenous and Native American tribes of the United States, for example.
Oh, yeah. They distinctly mentioned the Comanche, I believe.
Yeah. The Comanche comes up a lot. There's a lot of like, well, they're all the same. And like, they're all bloodthirsty monsters. And like all this racist nonsense. And I just also want to bring that up in addition to, I'm sure this was like, and this is what Dickens was saying around the exact same time. But like the men on this boat are also like, by the way, they're all the same, and they're all savages, and they're all bleh.
Yeah.
And I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. I hate all of it. Or whatever. It's fine.
I mean, it's
The
not
book,
fine, but I guess
think-
they're all dead now, so.
Yeah. I mean, because here's the thing. Like,
Well, we
and
also,
again, this
look,
is-
we don't know how racist they were. Obviously, some of them had to be
Probably
racist.
very.
The percentage skews.
in the very least, they had to have been at least like gently racist, right?
Right.
There's no way they weren't at least like gently racist
Like, even-
about it. Like
even
the,
Franklin,
the
I'm sure,
well-meaning
was-
racist.
I'm sure, yes, exactly. I'm sure Franklin was probably a well-meaning racist. Like, we're all a little bit
no.
racist. Like, here we are.
He was 100. I have receipts. He was a well-meaning racist.
Well, there we go.
I have
Exactly.
receipts from Tasmania.
This is what I'm
Like-
saying. Those are the quote unquote good ones.
I was
Yes,
going to say,
right.
that's like the best case scenario. Best case scenario, you
But,
meet a well-meaning
No,
racist.
to be honest, the best case scenario is John Brown.
Yes.
God
Sorry.
rest his soul. That's the best case scenario.
Friends, I just learned about John Brown, and I am slightly newly obsessed with John Brown, and I'm just like, give me more of this white dude who was desperately trying to do good by the black man. Give me all of it. Anyway, sorry. I just also wanted to point that out because we get that repeatedly in this show. We get a lot of like,
Yes.
well, you didn't meet the, I'm sure they just said Indians, but like you didn't meet the indigenous of the blah, blah, blah states of the colonies, like we get a lot of that.
Here's why I think the show chose to make Fitzjames more of the mouthpiece of this in this moment. Because we have set up in his stories that Fitzjames is a very active person. He is a go-getter. He is, you need something done, sign me up, I volunteer. We have Fitzjames sitting there thinking that this isn't an animal malice. This has to be a human cunning. At this point, he has no concept that it's something supernatural. So therefore, he's ignoring the evidence presented to insist it must be a human malice that is attacking them. I think it makes a lot of sense, especially in that he's so desperate to do something instead of sitting inside safely as men die, to the point Crozier has to yell him down that there is a squall outside.
Yeah. And the men
Like,
have been on, what is it called? The dog watches?
Yeah.
Where they're exhausted.
so-
They've been
yeah.
on these 2-hour watches and they need to rest. Like, they cannot go out and hunt the Toon Buck,
Yeah.
buck right now.
There is, as much as Fitzjames wants to run out there and take the fight to the Toonbach, Crozier has to remind him we are on nature's time right now. We are on the time limit of the exhaustion of our own men. We are on the time limit of there is a whiteout outside, and if we try to go outside, we will probably end up lost and frozen to death. There's nothing to be done right now.
And they sort of,
Meanwhile,
Yes, me. One. But they sort of land on this, like maybe we need to talk to Lady Silence again. They land on
morning.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But let's give it 8 hours. She's been camped out there for how many months? We can wait another day until, until our men have rested and we have the time, and we'll just go over there and we'll be polite about it. And then
yeah, while all of this is happening, Hickey has decided to take matters into his own hands. And so he finds two of his buddies and he's like, hey, you know where Lady Silence, although he does not use that name, you know where Lady Silence's camp is. Tell me where it is located. And they go out and they abduct her. So by the time Francis realizes what's going on, he's again in his cups when he hears a ruckus erupting from the main deck. And in the midst of all of the shouting, I couldn't figure out what was happening at first. But, he grabs a pistol. He's sprinting out there. I actually thought someone else had died. Hickey and his two men were gone forever, right?
Sure,
but it turns out they're not. The reason there's a ruckus on deck is that Hickey and his two men have successfully abducted Lady Silence, and now there's a fight breaking out on the main deck. Because not half, I don't know what the number is, but some amount of the men want to just kill her right there and then, slice her in half, just like she did with our men, right? And the others are pushing back and saying, no, captain's orders, we have to question her first.
Yeah. And Francis has to, now, from what I have read, Crozier was known as a disciplinarian. He did have a firm hand over his crews, but he was considered fair, and he was considered a very good seaman, so he had a lot of respect usually among whatever crew he sailed with because he knew his stuff, and while he could, bring down the discipline, it seems to be the sense that he was a fair and reasonable captain mostly. What we see here, however, is because, the worst thing that could happen in the Navy is a mutiny, right?
Yes.
There's so many properties that examine the British Navy and what happens when there is a collapse of discipline and order. Because all of this is based on the order of not only of the hierarchy of who's more knowledgeable than who, but you also have the officers, which are a minority on the ship, versus the able seamen, who are the majority. And the able seamen are usually treated like shit. Whereas the officers are whining and dining and, they don't have the same hardships that the others do. And unless you have the absolute discipline of classism is really what it comes down to, it will fall apart immediately. And if the men do not trust the authority of their captain, you're done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, the problem is, speaking of law and order and discipline, the short version is that Francis takes it way too far. And we know why he did that, because we get to be in the room when it happens. But the men don't know why he did that.
Right.
Your point is on par. That's exactly what happens.
That's the exact problem.
Francis lays it out. Disrespect to her and now to me. And again, this comes down to there's something wrong with Hickey. Hickey does not understand how this works in the Navy. The other men who participate in this, they get their punishment. Their alcohol
lashes.
will be watered to 6 permanently, 12 lashes, you name it.
Regular duties until otherwise.
They are quiet. They are quiet.
Then they take the knuckle to the forelock and they step back and they
because
accept their punishment.
Right? They were acting against orders. Technically, they deserted their posts because they certainly weren't supposed to leave them, right? Insubordination, this, that. Francis goes ahead and lists 6 different things they've done wrong. So
and what does Hickey do?
Considered, the fact that they're not losing their rank is actually merciful.
Yeah. And I think even Fitzjames says something about a full court martial or something? Like we're in the middle of nowhere. Do we really have time for this?
Like the one who's standing and next to him after he decides on the punishment, the tall one standing next to him is like, well, technically you need a full court-martial to execute any of these punishments. And I don't know. He throws it away and says, like, I know where we are on a map. We don't need a full court-martial. Whatever. Yeah. I don't remember what it is.
But the problem ultimately is that Hickey doesn't understand what just happened, because Hickey is trying to talk himself out of a punishment, which is not what happens in the British Navy. That is not. That's not no. Like I know nothing. Zero about like any armed forces on the planet, but I'm sitting here like, there is a hierarchy, sir. I don't understand what you think you're arguing against. Like,
well, don't you know he had a whiskey with the captain, so
right? He had that whiskey.
Wait.
Hashtag he had that whiskey.
Oh my gosh. So he's pushing back, and it's that classic thing that happens in X number of movies, right?
And like a 2 weeks, 3 weeks, punished. A month.
Yes, exactly. And so Francis goes from 12 to 20 to 30, and Hickey is not letting up. He's like insisting that he saved everyone's lives, that this woman is to blame for everything that happens, like blah, 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 blah. And finally we get to 30 lashes as a boy. And that's what finally...
And this is also how you know there's something not right with Hickey, because he doesn't even understand what that means. And so the next scene, we see the punishment doled out, and it's awful. It is waist down, bare naked body to the world. Mm-hmm. And those lashes do not stop. Like, they do not stop.
It's with a cat of tails. So it's with knotted rope, with multiple, pieces of rope on a single handle, and it's brutal. It's brutal normally. In fact, it's funny. I'm sorry. I know I'm looking at the time, but I have to mention this.
It's okay.
Like, while the Franklin expedition is trapped in the ice, there is an infamous case in the Army in 1846, the death of Frederick John White, who was a private who touched a sergeant with a metal bar during an argument while drunk. And he was court-martialed and sentenced to 150 lashes with a cat o' nine tails. And he wasn't bent over. He was up on a ladder, but the man died from it.
Whoa.
And this case led to maybe we can't do more than 50 lashes.
Right. Yeah.
So the fact that Crozier stops at 30 is
a mercy.
Yeah. And I mean, the difference here, and part of the reason the scene is extra brutal, is because the two men who saluted and knew what was up got 12 lashes across the back. But what Hickey gets is 30 lashes across his bottom.
And like, not only is it brutal, but we as the audience sit here knowing that Hickey has a homosexual relationship with another man. Mm-hmm. There is a level going on here that is triply uncomfortable as a viewer, right?
Yeah. Also, as a queer person watching this, it was very uncomfortable for me.
Yeah. 100%.
All of this is happening. And again, like, Francis and Fitzjames, because this is one of the rare moments in the show where Francis and Fitzjames are actually on the same side and united in their opposition of someone else.
Well, because it's a direct challenge to both of their authorities, so they have to be in a cahoots on this one.
Right. But Francis, because he's the one who doled out the punishment, is the one who's saying, like, keep going, right? But, everyone else in the crew is just watching this happen, and they don't know why Hickey was given this punishment.
Because he has the same charges as everyone else.
Yeah. I mean, Crozier gives the list, and I think one is dirtiness or something. I have to go back to my not notes, I forgot to write them down, but like of the actual charges of why he's getting this additional punishment.
It doesn't fit the crime.
Even if it sounds, even if you go down the list and it sounds like, okay, that sounds pretty serious, but watching someone get whipped 30 times, although Joy counted, she's like, that was 27 or something.
I know, yeah. Yeah, no, they didn't show all 30, which, thank you, show. Thank you for I guess, not doing that.
But they did make it linger for quite a long time.
Yeah,
because they wanted to sink into your skin to explain why this is where the seeds of the mutiny are laid.
Yep. Yep.
Because what happens is Hickey goes back to his bedroll and
finds a gift of tobacco in his hammock. Somebody
solidarity
is telling him, I'm sorry that happened to you. Here, have something from me to help hopefully ease your time now that you won't be able to sit at the mess hall anymore. You're gonna be standing for 2 weeks pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Also,
so he gets a little bit of tobacco. And it's pretty much directly after that, although there's a scene with Lady Silence that we have to discuss. But it's pretty much directly after that where Crozier is also given the news that Lieutenant Little took a survey of everyone on the ship, right? Because the Erebus is tilting. Some people have to go to the Terror.
The Terror is tilting.
Oh, yeah,
so
other way
need
around.
To go to
Sorry.
the Erebus, yeah.
Yeah, other way around. And they're like, volunteer basis only, expecting just a few people to want to switch over to the other ship, and instead, everyone except for 10 men.
All but 10 people decide to go bunk up in the Erebus and shove into those quarters because the vibes on the Terror are just that bad.
Yeah. Yep.
What a fucking world.
Yeah. No, it's bad.
Gee, Francis, I wonder why everyone wanted to jump ship.
Yeah, seriously. Seriously, we went from birthday party to this.
Yeah, right?
Real quick, because I do want to get to the hot goss. Real quick, talking about that Lady Silence scene, where she's taken to the basically the doctor's cabin.
So it's obvious she's not safe on the Terror. So Crozier asks Fitzjames to take her back to the Erebus. Now, fucking racist Fitzjames, has Lady Silence now, but tripping over himself to seem decent, just Dr. Stanley, take care of her and get her something to eat and stuff, and I don't know, whatever.
Dr. Stanley, worst person on the ship to ask.
Worst person ever to answer. And of course, just immediately delegates it to Mr. Good Sir. Just I don't want to deal with this. Here, good sir, it's your problem now.
Yeah,
at least it's good, sir.
A job you love,
And my favorite thing about this scene is Good Sir brings her food and tries to talk to her a little bit and tries to do that classic thing of this is my name, this is what I am called, and try and introduce himself and try and give that real Victorian hospitality, which was hilarious to me because it was just this is some of the best food, you could be paying top dollar for this at the club. And she literally spits it back out onto the plate because it's awful. And then of course she's where's this? Okay, there's a raw fish. Thank goodness. And she starts
there's a salted meat. You know what? I'll eat the salted meat that has fat at least.
Yeah.
And
it's my favorite thing because it's would you please, for the love of God, pay attention to the indigenous in the area?
Well, no, but he's legitimately giving her food that they're eating,
yes.
Yeah.
No, I love that she tries chocolate and she hates it.
Yeah.
So no soup, no chocolate, yes, bacon. Bacon okay.
Yeah. Well, bacon is the closest thing to what her normal diet would be. But honestly, he does bring her a plate of what everyone else would have been eating. And honestly,
yes.
The favorite food of the men was the salted pork. That slab of bacon was their favorite thing. They got it, I think, they got it at least twice a week.
That would make sense.
But it was also, it's not good for your diet, but it's delicious and they loved it. So,
well, what else are you going to do when you're on a ship for?
Yeah.
Okay. We need to talk about the hot goss.
I need to wrap up on Good Sir and Lady Silence.
No, please. Please go ahead.
Because we need to just discuss the moment where, he's talking about, I've been trying to learn some of your words. Inuit Tituk, which is what their language is called, and Nunavut. I like these words very much. And I love the sincerity and the actual curiosity that Good Sir has that is so gentle and kind,
Agree.
right? Even in a previous scene where he's looking over the photograph plates just before the Tumbak attacked, and he's trying to figure out if he sees the Tumbak in the background. He's making a claw shape, remembering how the Marines were attacked and bitten apart, and trying to figure out what size mouth must that be. And he's the naturalist, he's the surgeon. His brain is making the motions, trying to understand the world around him, not trying to fall back into like racist conjecture or
Right.
Well, you know, your eyes must be lying to you.
Yeah. He's trying to believe what's in front of him. Just like Crozier is, you know, but Crozier is inebriated.
And what's in front of him is an Inuit woman who he doesn't know the language yet, but he wants to learn. Mm-hmm. He wants to understand. But he also is in a place of personal horror.
Right.
Because he says, this is not how Englishmen act.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, baby, this is how Englishmen act, though.
Yeah.
Baby, I'm sorry. This is par for the course, actually. Bless your heart.
Like you had me until you said that, and then I was like, oh, you are an Englishman. You are in fact an Englishman.
This is that entitlement of like, but there are better people out there, and it's like, are there though? It's particularly from England.
Wait, what does this mean for us? Are we on One More Things?
No, we're on the hot goss from 1840.
We're on the hot goss.
Is that your One More Thing?
Hot goss.
Man, I'm gonna have
this has to be Nella's One More Thing because we're over time.
Right, we have the flashback to Sophia and Francis.
Oh,
where
I'm glad
she's
that you mentioned that. We skipped it.
Yes, right? Because she's like, I've seen your rooms, scandalous. She's like, I like, you keep everything in one drawer, double scandalous. You've been there long enough in his private rooms to go through his drawers, girl.
I had that thought too. I was like, was there an escort, madam?
Yeah, no, there wasn't. So
he's trying to fall over her in that scene too.
Right? No, he's very, like, he's taking liberties, sir. Back up. I mean, I'm into it, but back up. Like, but just again to that scene, again, we have the discussion of habits and the habits you bring to a marriage, to a ship as a captain, you know?
Yes.
And I do really love bringing it back to that, because let's discuss book Sophie versus show Sophie versus history Sophie, or Sophia. In the book, The Terror, the description of Sophia is, here's the quote, "She was witty, alive, vivacious, sometimes shocking in her comments and boldness, even more so than her controversial aunt, the Lady Jane, and young and beautiful and seemingly interested in every aspect of the 44-year-old bachelor Commander Francis Crozier's opinions, life, and sundry thoughts." Crozier describes how he is instantly in love with her, and this is like the real thing. Ignore all his dockyard doxies, his back alley knee wobblers, his some native girls doing the deed for trinkets, a few overpriced nights in gentlemen's whorehouses. All that's behind him now, right? In the book, she takes him to a platypus pond and then proceeds to have a sexual encounter with him while describing platypuses. It's a very intriguing scene.
Huh?
Yeah. Like, she definitely gets him off and gets herself off, but, like, without actual, like, you know, P and V intercourse, if we're going to get into the real dirty of it. He tries to propose to her after this, and she just rejects him. And she tries to let him down with, don't be concerned about it. You haven't compromised my honor. Like, we just had a little bit of fun.
I definitely thought you were saying that they got each other off by only talking about platypuses. but I'm understanding.
No, they're in the, like, look,
Okay,
this is,
I was just like,
like,
it took me 3 seconds to get there, and I was like,
trying,
wait a minute,
look,
what?
I know I swear jar cursing, but I'm just like, I don't know how much I can describe about this scene without it being like, and now we have to slap an explicit rating on
it's
this.
fine.
I feel
now
like I'm already...
No. It was not only by talking about
it's a sexual encounter.
It is a sexual encounter, but I appreciate that, like, her interpretation of said sexual encounter and his subsequent proposal was like, no, you don't have to save me from whatever we just did. I'll be okay.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. And then in the book, and when he's in this fever dream towards the end, he has a vision of her, and I think it's really, really telling. Now he sees her as he has never seen her before, a future present Sophia, proud, grieving, secretly happy to be grieving, renewed and reborn as her Aunt Lady Jane Franklin's full-time assistant and companion. She will never mention Francis Crozier, not even in private. It is, he sees at once, a perfect role for Sophia, brave, imperious, entitled, able to play the coquette in decades with the perfect excuse of avoiding commitment or real love. She will never marry.
And she doesn't marry in history also, right?
No, in history she does not marry. Now let's talk about the real...
I just while we're still talking about the book, I have a bone to pick with the way he writes women, but it's fine.
Oh no, it's terrible. Look, again, Dan Simons did his research and then made choices with that research.
Right.
And that's what we're dealing with. Anyway, so the reality of what we know about Sophie and Francis is that there is no definite account of the exact nature of their relationship.
Okay.
What we do know is that at the height of the search for the Erebus and Terror in the 1850s, one of the ships carried a letter that she wrote to her uncle, and she added a brief message to Crozier that said, "Pray remember me very kindly to Captain Crozier." Now, the letter was returned to her unopened. That's one thing we know of her writing about Francis after...
Wait, so we don't even know if the proposals are true?
No, we know the proposals are true.
Okay.
At least 3 of them. So I'm going to get into it. So here's the hot goss. And again, I preface this with... Sophia's personal papers are held by the Scott Polar Research Institute archives at the University of Cambridge. Mm-hmm. Naturally, I cannot easily access them and read them myself and come to my own conclusions. However...
White hats, just kidding.
According to Icebound in the Arctic by Michael Smith, which is a book focused on the life of Francis Crozier, Sophia was born in 1816. When she was 9, her father died, and she was taken in by the Franklins, and she fit very easily into their family. Her mother was the sister of Sir John. His sister was beloved to him, so he, like, open arms, loved her very, very dearly. And she was actually friends with Sir John's second wife long before their marriage in 1828. Supposedly.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And Jane Franklin was 24 years older than Sophie, and the two were very close from the beginning of, like, their relationship. Like, so she was pretty much adopted by John Franklin. He married.
Do we know anything about her mom or no?
Just that she was a sister of Sir John.
Okay.
I could probably dig more, but that's their relationship. It's like his sister was her mother.
Right.
In 1837, she's only 20. She travels with Franklin and his family to Tasmania, and she is 24 years old when she meets the 44-year-old Crozier for the first time. Crozier rolls up with James Clark Ross to Van Diemen's Land, a.k.a. Tasmania. Jane Franklin observed several minor flirtations that came to nothing during the years Sophia was at Hobart, and coolly pigeoned the fickle Sophie as a sad flirt.
Oh,
no! Allegedly, guests at the Franklin dinner table one night said Sophie was suitable only for 2 roles,
Aww.
queen or a bishop's wife. Sophie did not challenge the judgment and wrote in her diary, "If I were queen, I should enjoy tormenting my ministers."
Oh, man.
So she's saucy.
She's saucy.
I'd be so sad if someone called me a sad flirt. Like, that's so
especially
upsetting
my
to me.
aunt. Although, hang on, I'm getting to the hot goss because a part of me is like, I feel like there's a reason Lady Jane was just like, she's a sad flirt. I have I cannot back this up, but allegedly she was a snob who regarded the untutored Crozier as a horrid radical and an indifferent speller. However, she seems to have liked him as a person, and I'm going to get to that. But then also, when they first meet, she's 24, he's 44, and here's the quote from the book. Sophie turned her amorous attentions to Ross. She threw herself at him in a flagrant attempt to break up his engagement with Anne Coleman, an ungracious move that earned a sniffy rebuke from Jane Franklin. Here, though, there may have been an ulterior motive, as Jane Franklin herself had fallen for James Clark Ross's spell and was soon describing him as the most handsome man in the Navy. Ross politely resisted Sophie's clumsy advances, which created a tangled state of affairs at the Governor House in Tasmania. Crozier was sighing for Sophie, and Sophie was yearning for Ross, while in the background, a straight-laced Lady Franklin kept her mild infatuation with Ross under strict control. I'm just like, what is going on in 1840 in Van Diemen's land? To be a fly on the wall, I'm dying.
What is this
awkward,
what happens when you're socially and sexually repressed? Like, what's
what
going
awkward
on?
silences? Like, what awkward, like playing spades at the table?
Right? No, here's the thing that really blew my mind, right? Because I'd read the book, I watched the show, and then I read this, and I feel like my entire paradigm has shifted. According to the book, Crozier, though normally reserved, emerged as a highly popular figure during his time at Hobart, especially with Lady Franklin. The two developed a lasting friendship, and Crozier responded by calling her a dear, good woman. He was always comfortable in Lady Franklin's presence despite her spirited nature and acerbic tongue. One onlooker noted that Jane Franklin's relationship with Crozier was less formal and more companionable than her association with Ross. So where's the truth? You're telling me Frances and Lady Jane were buds? Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
Oh, no. I wasn't either.
I was not expecting that. Oh no.
So no, it gets better. No,
I love this deeply because I just have to say quickly, Nella, my mental image of you is like you explaining this to us in front of like a murder wall with yarn and just like connecting like this person did this person. Did you know this person?
I appreciate that, but I'm also sad that your first inclination wasn't like I'm sitting in a parlor with like a cup of tea and a fan and I am giving you this like Lady Whistledown hot goss.
Well, no, this is like the modern interpretation, what we are currently doing.
Yeah, no, it's a murder wall. It's a societal murder wall. It's 100%. Anyway, so right, they go to the Antarctic. They come back. Crozier tries to propose again. There's a supposition that the reason it really didn't work the second time is because Lady Franklin wasn't there. She was off in New Zealand exploring.
Oh, okay.
So she wasn't there to be like, I don't know, he's kind of nice or whatever. What a weird thing to take away from this entire situation. But let's continue. Rejected a second time. He goes back to England. At the same time, Sophia and the Franklins return to England as well. So then it's just like, okay, third time's the charm. Let's go. He's going to do it. Supposedly, he loses his fucking mind.
When he's rejected for a third time?
Well, okay. Supposedly, during the time after June 1844, and throughout that whole summer, supposedly the two of them spent a bit of time together during the summer of 1844. And supposedly Crozier was increasingly insistent. So she keeps turning him down. She's adamant that she has no intention of becoming a sea captain's wife.
Right.
Which makes sense. He is described as he lived most of his adult life out of a trunk. He had little money and few possessions. Meanwhile, Sophie was accustomed to the style and glamour of a colonial governor's household. She had no shortage of male callers. I mean, even Crozier called himself a half-paid bachelor, right?
Right.
So supposedly in that summer, as Crozier's trying, and Sophie's like, I keep telling you no, this started to alarm the two people who knew him best, James Clark Ross and Lady Franklin.
Oh, no.
And Lady Franklin writes a letter to James Clark Ross
Oh, no.
that pretty much boils down to, I have some concerns about our mutuals. I wish to tell you what Sophie writes to me on the subject. She is asking for an audience with James Clark Ross so they can talk this out in person and not put it into writing.
And you're like, if I could be a fly on that wall.
I am losing my mind. I'm dying.
And it's what's the thing you always tell me about, Nella, of like Thomas Jefferson and like how they never wrote anything down.
Thomas Jefferson and John Adams did a tour of England and didn't write anything in their diaries for 2 weeks. And I'm like, what happened in those 2 weeks? I only have like 2 stories from that time. One where they're at like the Battle of Hastings and like Adams gets really emotional and Jefferson gives him shit for it. And supposedly Jefferson tries to jump a wall and breaks his wrist doing it. Like, that's all I have from like their weird, like, I'm like, did you go full like hot tub, like time travel? Like, what weird Harold and Kumar
They were whisked away for 2 weeks.
Happened that you couldn't write about it.
These are two people who constantly they kept the time
every day.
And
they
the
wrote
weather,
in their journal,
and they like their thoughts. They were every single day they wrote something down. And this 2 weeks,
supposedly for 2 whole weeks, they just didn't write anything about their road trip together throughout Georgia, England.
But anyway, I'm sorry.
When they were ambassadors.
I'm derailing you. I apologize.
Yeah, no, this is your fault. Anyway.
But that's how I feel about this comment.
No.
How dare you not write anything down?
Yeah. Do you, no, like, dear sir, I need to meet up with you to talk some Georgia, and I can't put it in writing.
Put it in writing.
Lady Jane. That's what that pretty much boils down to.
Yep.
Which I'm mind blown. Anyway, so what we do know is that Crozier then writes a letter to Ross in September of 1844. And to quote the book, in his note, Crozier asked his old friend to show some understanding of his recent behavior. Clearly chastened by events, he wrote, I am now quite recovered and trust with God's blessing to keep myself clear of all such scrapes in future. I ought to have had more wisdom. However, James dear, I gave you enough bother about it. I'm going to spend a lifetime unpacking that.
I love that as a sign off.
So here's what I'm gathering. It's not that Crozier is not one of the catty bitches. It's that Crozier's catty bitch was not on the expedition.
No, yeah. So Crozier had a catty bitch. His name was James Clark Ross. And Crozier was a messy bitch.
Yes.
That's the line. You have your catty bitch.
Takeaway.
And you have your messy bitch. And Crozier was a messy bitch.
I mean, that is pretty hot goss.
And then honestly, you want to know what even better?
Yes.
No, wait, even better than that? Then he goes to Florence, Italy for a couple of months. And then comes back to join the expedition.
Yeah, of course he does.
Which leaves in May of 1845.
Right, but he is, and as we've established in history, he is obviously not like involved in the preparation for this voyage. Like he's
a little checked out. I mean, he's showing up. He's, waving the old hand. There is some suggestion that he may have made one final attempt to propose to Sophie, but she would have been in the midst of seeing how miserable her uncle and her aunt were in the preparations for this. If her whole thing was, I don't want to be a Navy captain's wife, this would have sealed the deal for her. Because even Crozier himself noted that Lady Jane was in a sad state in the days before departure. There's this one quote from the book that I find really telling, where many years later, McClintock, who was one of the people who looked for the Franklin expedition, asked Lady Jane Franklin to reveal Sophie's true feelings for the lovesick Crozier. Lady Franklin paused for a moment and replied, "The pity is, Sir Leopold, Sophie liked the man, but not the sailor." So,
and I think, it's exactly as you said, like we see that in this episode. Like we see, Sophie being like, right, and then you're just going to go back on the water. Like, are you going to go south? No, you're going to go north. Like,
yeah,
And
then, unfortunately, his general demeanor and standing are brought into play, too, because he tries to say, like, listen, I'm not going to be out in the seas for the rest of my life, right? Like, I can go on this one expedition, and then I can be an admiral, and I can just be one of the guys in the office
or just
down
be
the
knighted
hall.
or something.
And she basically tells him that's never going to happen for you.
Yeah.
You don't know how to do politics. You're middle-bred. You're Irish.
You're too calm and you're too Irish. Yeah.
That's never going to happen.
Presbyterian or whatever it is.
Yeah.
I want my one more thing is there's this one quote of Jane Franklin asked all the search expedition commanders to carry a personal letter to her husband, and one note provided an indication of her regard for Crozier. "Next to you, I think of dear Captain Crozier," she wrote. "I trust you have never been forced to separate and that you have been a mutual comfort to each other." And when I tell you, reading this and just being like, the relationship between Crozier and Lady Jane being my, like, I need more about that than Sophie. Like, Sophie, the book is meaner towards Sophie. I think Sophie was just a young woman who loved her family, who might have enjoyed the company of this captain, but he was also 20 years older than her. Mm-hmm. Like, come on.
No, do I believe 100% that Lady Jane being in the same age range was like a sister to Crozier? 100%.
Or just like, I'm married, you're not, but like, I have the respectability of a married woman, so like, I can shoot the shit with you, Crozier. Yeah. And like, you get me as like an adventurous lady. 100%. Like,
do I believe that Crozier as a person probably treated her like a person? And that was probably also extremely appealing, considering the time in which they both existed.
Sure.
I'm getting like Angelica Schuyler vibes.
Oh,
100%.
Okay, Joy, do you want to go first for one more thing, or do you want me to go first?
I'll go first because, well, actually, maybe I should go last because mine is kind of off topic, but it was really just a thing it's a thing I was reminded of during the birthday scene.
Okay, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so there's something about like science fiction dramas or horror TV shows or something like that where it's like if you have a doomed thing and then you celebrate something, like, it's almost a trope, but it's probably not overused at this point, where it's like somebody is actually celebrating a thing and then a terrible, horrible thing happens. And all I could think of was like, I'm sure this has happened in other dramas before, but like it gave me such strong like Battlestar Galactica vibes where there's an episode of the reboot of Battlestar Galactica where somebody is celebrating their 100th flight, and everybody on the flight deck is supposed to like get everything together and like, basically parade him around because it's this big exciting thing. And like, you have this stuff hanging over you of like, you know, you are the last of your kind and like the human race is probably going to die out because there's only like 60,000 of you. Spoilers, I guess, for Battlestar Galactica. But like, you know, you have these like things in place that are, you know, you have this one moment of hope and one moment of joy because somebody had their 100th flight on a starship. And then instantly it falls to pieces because, again, everyone's overworked, everyone's exhausted, no one's paying attention, and the flight deck is destroyed, including the person whose 100th flight it was. And, like, 4 people die.
That makes sense. That makes me think of, like, the episode with the meat cake in Firefly, right?
Exactly, right? Like, this is a very specific thing of, like, you know, I love it because it also brings the viewer into this position of like warmth and hope and like, you know, because you have to have those moments to balance out all the crap. But, you know, as we saw again in this show, it's like even the person who is celebrating a birthday is not safe from, you know, the horrors of where they are and the circumstances they're under.
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a great one more thing. Okay.
Thanks.
My one more thing is about Hickey.
Yes.
I hate. And I'm so mad. I'm so mad that the show, first of all, I know we've like a little bit said this, but I'm so mad that the show introduced this queer gay character and then
the bad
proceeds
gays.
to make me hate them. Like,
Yeah.
I hate that. That's so annoying. And we can talk about that. We can talk about that further because, but I don't know anything about this actor. And so I don't know what this actor is like in real life, but man, does he really sell this character. And he does. He's brilliant. And probably.
He's so good.
Yeah.
He showed up and understood the assignment.
Yeah. And so my one more thing is really more about the actor than anything else, which is my favorite moment of his in this episode. And my favorite moment of his in this episode is when he is telling his account of how they captured Lady Silence. And he is making up details, making himself the hero. He's like, it was 3 times the size of any bear, a different set to its head. She was holding out her hands in front of her like so, as if to cast a spell. And he thinks that he's got Fitzjames and Francis, hook, line, and sinker, right? And so he's like telling the story. He talks about how the bear was spooked. I mean, my other favorite thing about this scene is Fitzjames and Francis, who are giving him nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like
Zero.
Francis literally goes, not Francis, Fitzjames literally goes, his eyes. You saw his eyes, right? And goes, you spooked it? What spooked it exactly, right? He's like tossing it all back at Hickey, and Hickey is not picking up what they're putting down. Like he still thinks that he is nailing this story. And finally he gets to the moment where he's like, or Fitzjames like throws him a bone. And he's like, all right, so you saw his eyes. What happened? And he's like, all right, the bear looked right at me. And then it didn't run for me. It ran south. And the thing is, I don't believe it is an animal.
Yeah.
And without missing a beat, Francis goes, yeah, we know.
Yeah.
And Fitzjames like does this little sniff and doesn't even look up at him. And Hickey's entire face falls.
To me, the best part.
It's so good.
To me, the best part about the Hickey telling the story is because in the book, it's Irving who has this experience. Irving, who is the one, remember, who caught Hickey in, delicate, whatever the term is for it, the fancy French term
in
for your pants
flagrante
are down.
delicta.
Yes, or whatever. I don't care. The point is, he's the one who becomes kind of obsessed with Lady Silence. He notices that Lady Silence has access to fresh meat. He figures out how she gets off the ship, and he lies in wait for her, and he follows her through the ice to where she has a meeting with the Tombach, which is depicted as an incredibly sexual scene. For some reason, the weird flute music gets him off. Like, it's very uncomfortable. But, like, Irving is the one who sees her communing with the Toonbach and has, it tries to explain this back. And we have given this description, this attempt at a description at Hickey, which I think works really well, actually.
Yeah.
Because, again, Irving is sort of infatuated with her. It works better when it's Hickey, and you're like, is he lying or did he actually see something? In the book, we know that the person who witnessed this saw something, but maybe Hickey didn't see something. He's making stuff up. Or is he?
Or
regardless, he's doing it for his own benefit, which backfires immensely.
Absolutely backfires. They give him nothing. And again, actor, just chef's kiss, brilliant, fantastically delivered scene. Like, snaps all around.
Yeah. No, he does an amazing job. He continues to do an amazing job. The show builds him up as this sort of the antithesis, and not really the antagonist, because the show is not as clear cut that way, which I guess you could describe Hickey as the antagonist, but like you really get the sense that him and Crozier are on the same playing field but playing two very different games. And like they are the two pillars of something to be, to clash eventually. And this is like the first instance of that.
Look, I'll tell you straight up, Hickey is an incredibly polarizing figure in the fandom. And I have my own opinions about book Hickey versus show Hickey. I like show Hickey much more than I like book Hickey.
Okay.
Personally.
Well, dear listeners, you can look forward to hearing all about that, not in this particular podcast episode.
At almost 2 hours. Though I'll try to cut this down as much as I can.
Are well over time.
Well over time.
With that, we would love to hear from you. Please check us out at Binge O'Clock Pod on Twitter and Facebook, where you can describe your perfect piece of bacon. You can also email us at bingeoclockpod@gmail.com. And don't forget, we have a Patreon. Find us at patreon.com/clockpod.
That's right. And tell your friends, tell your family, tell your loved ones, tell the live lobsters in your life about Binge O'Clock, and we will see you next time.
So you got to bake the shit out of it. Like, it has to be crispy bacon or
Oven
get out.
baked.
Are you one of the people
Oven
who like
baked.
puts it, who like oven bakes it, but between the two trays so it like flattens out?
Yeah.
You're one of those people?
I will build little tents of aluminum foil to raise the bacon out of the grease so it can all drip down. And then every bit gets crispy. And if like I need to be able to break it. Otherwise, what's the point? I do not like flabby bacon. No, I cannot abide pan-cooked bacon.
I am a crispy
exactly
bacon
the
person
same way.
also.
I want it crispy but not burnt, which is really hard to achieve.
No, the line between it, like, it's very delicate, and it is a skill, like, to get between crispy, breakable, but not burnt.
So
and if I like hold one end of it and the entire thing limps down, I'm like, hard no, thank you.
Put that back in the pan and try again. Like,
so there's a running joke